Hello, Norwich. I just really always wanted to do that. Hello. Hello, my name's Liam. I live in Doncaster. Beautiful place. Anyone ever been? Yeah. You know. I'm going to start off with a joke. There is an actual comedian on the front row, so this is a bit risky, but, you know, we've talked about chatbots doing jokes. Good luck, ChatGPT, coming up with this gold. What's a goose's favourite city? Hong Kong. That's good. That's just good. That's just good, honest fun. I'll break some of the ice with that. What I'm going to talk about is the fact that for the last 10 years, I've spent my time essentially desperately trying to pay my bills by making people laugh. And when I say laugh, what I mean, rather than Nelson, who actually does need to make people laugh, the amount of laughter that I evoke from people is nothing more than probably... And I'll take that. I'll take that all the way to the bank, baby. Yeah, I've had to be funny for money. If I can make people smile, then hopefully they might buy some Taylors of Harrogate coffee bags. Any Taylors of Harrogate coffee bag fans in? Yeah. There's let me guess, hang on. Flying Star or Hot Lava Java? Hot Lava Java, he loves it. So what I'm going to talk about is, first off, some of the kind of barriers that I've faced and that people who are trying to work in social or digital or be funny or try and engage with customers that don't necessarily care about following a coffee brand on social media, some of the issues that I've had in doing that as a person, because it is quite exhausting in its own way. And then I'm going to share some of the examples of where I've hopefully done things that have had the desired effect. So, the first thing that I wanted to talk about is having the courage to be yourself. So, picture the scene. A young, starry-eyed, postgraduate Liam Smith pops up in the City of Dreams, Doncaster, South Yorkshire. It wasn't actually a city at that point, so it's more like the largest metropolitan borough unitary authority of our dreams, Doncaster, South Yorkshire. Little known fact, I'll pepper them in if you like about Doncaster. I do know a few. Thomas Crapper, the inventor of the flushing toilet, was from Doncaster, so... Having the courage to be yourself was a massive thing for me when I started my career. I pitched up, starry-eyed. I was hired as a press officer for the council, so I felt like I had to be someone that I'm maybe not. I'd watched the thick of it, and I thought I had to be like Malcolm Tucker, just bollocking people left, right, and centre, spinning council stuff into amazing stories. Really, it's a lot about writing bin calendars and collection dates. But nevertheless, I kind of turned up and I thought, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I had that feeling that I'm sure a lot of us in the room have had of just complete imposter syndrome, where I was like, they're going to find out before long that I have no idea what I'm on about in this job. And actually, it was only when I started to have a bit of courage and bravery to use, you might have gathered by now by the fact that I've desperately been trying to do it this entire time, but making people laugh is one of my just crutches in society. I'm so reliant on that in conversation. It's just how I get to know people. But yet I was never bringing that into my work. I think because you work for a council, it's meant to be all serious all the time. And I remember the first thing that I ever did that I felt like I put some of my personality in. We did a Facebook post about Doncaster Christmas Light Switch On 2015. Thank you. That woo was perfectly adequate for the standard of the lighting. And I wrote, it's not funny in the slightest, but in council terms, this was groundbreaking. I wrote, you better not laugh, you better not cry, you better not pout. I'm telling you why, because it's a very festive, fun event and you'll really spoil the atmosphere. People bloody went wild for it, let me tell you. Engagement shot through the roof. We went from 4 likes to 7. It was, the phone was ringing off the hook. It was the most manic day. But what that did, it kind of showed me that, hang on, I've done something that I actually thought wasn't completely crap and boring. And it's worked. The world hasn't stopped turning. I've not been sacked. The mayor's not marched me into her office and said, you're a disgrace to the largest metropolitan borough unitary authority in the country. I wasn't sacked. It was fine. So basically, over the next couple of years, I just kept being a bit cheeky and trying to take that further and further. And once you're in that mindset of actually, I can bring myself to this and I can be personal, then it's about seizing opportunities and spotting opportunities where they are. So I'd like to talk about the first big opportunity that I saw in Doncaster that I seized upon. By the way, this could not have worked better. I'm sad that Stacey can't be here, but for someone who's going to talk about council social media, someone coming up and doing 5 minutes of talk about littering is like the perfect warm-up act that I could ever have. It's got the appetites wet. This is about fly tipping, which, as we all know, is a scourge on our society, as you found out the other day in that school. Somebody dumped a speedboat in Doncaster, and I was sent just this photo. That was it. And everyone was very serious of, oh, isn't this bloody disgusting that someone, bloody speedboat in bloody Mexborough. It's 50 fucking miles to nearest water. Everyone was very, very serious, but my instinct, and through the confidence that I'd had, through the slight successes I'd had, was obviously to start to debate whether maybe this was an unwanted prize from an 80s, 90s game show called Bullseye, where often people would win a speedboat, whether they lived in Doncaster or at the seaside. And I basically just wrote a thread on Twitter, and this is, again, a sign of the times. This was so innovative at the time. I used some GIFs. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was the sort of response we got. People loved it. And when I say the 7 likes from the Christmas post went mental, this did at the time go truly mad. It turns out the bar for council comms is incredibly low, because someone wrote this article that my this 1,000 retweets had won the internet. The greatest piece of digital content from local government ever. Written by this guy at his desk while he had a chubba chub. I was covered in the Daily Mail. They wrote about it. They wrote my favourite sentence ever, which said the council worker went on to post a slew of memes. And I just thought, thank you. And I was actually interviewed on Radio 5 Live about it, and not about the speedboat, about my tweets, and about whether, is this a groundbreaking moment in the history of how a local authority communicates with local people? And I'm sat there thinking, I did a GIF of Duran Duran on a boat. It's really not that deep. But it just gave me that, again, that push to just keep doing more, keep pushing, keep seeing these opportunities. And then the two really that have just, and will always follow me around for the rest of my life, the two real viral things that I did. In just after this, actually, Christmas 2017, we ran a competition to name the fleet of gritter lorries in Doncaster, which now every gritter has a name that you can imagine. Greta Thunberg, she wasn't around when I was doing this. 45,000 people voted in the final of the competition to name Doncaster's gritter lorry, which, really depressing fact about Doncaster, is a better turnout than there was in the local election the following year. Gritsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Anti-Slip Machine was the winning entry. And it went to like and again, in council terms, stratospheric level. It was mentioned on the last leg. The Grand Tour did a piece about it. I was interviewed on BBC News and Sky News. Like, celebrities were tweeting about gritting in Doncaster, and I was just losing my mind. But I just tried to keep coming back to those key principles that don't kind of get too far ahead of yourself, don't get caught up in chasing those likes, just be authentic and try to bring myself to it. And no better sign of that really than after this had kind of gone massive and everyone in the council wanted to then get involved in it. They said, we've got to do something. We should do something really funny for like the end of it all. Why don't we do... And honestly, it was like a round table of the 10 worst ideas you've ever heard. And what we did in the end is I managed to convince them we should make it deliberately crap. We should do like the most council party ever. So we got just the bounties out of a box of celebrations. We got party poppers and like one of those blower things. And we just had a piece of paper that said, thanks for taking part. And that just finished it off in the perfect kind of way. But again, it was human, and it wasn't kind of trying too hard. Very quickly, I won't dwell on it, but the second thing is just going to follow me around for the rest of my life. During COVID, I don't know if anyone's heard the story, in the 70s in America, a town blew up a whale. Has anyone ever heard of that? Basically, I'll just sum it up very quickly. A whale washed up on a beach in Oregon, and they had some options of what to do with it, one of which was like cutting it up. It's a bit grim, cutting it up and trying to just throw it back in the sea. Someone, thankfully, for the purposes of social media gold, decided to blow it up. And they spoke to an explosives expert, as you would, and the explosive expert said, you're not going to need too much dynamite to get that job done. And thankfully, for the purposes of social media gold, that person ignored the expert advice and used over a ton of dynamite and exploded a whale over the entire town of Florence, Oregon. And right at the start of COVID, we were trying to think of ways to how to not be political about it, how to combat some of the messaging that maybe wasn't so good from the government and try to just get people to stay at home. So I saw that story. I'd seen it years ago. It was somewhere in my subconscious. And I used that story to say, basically, that man in Oregon ignored expert advice and made a contained, smaller problem into a big problem that everyone then had bits of whale on their cars and pools and houses. So please don't ignore the expert advice and turn this contained problem into a bigger problem. That was the premise of what I did. It ended up getting 80 million impressions on Twitter, which was a bit more than the 7 likes we got on Facebook initially. It honestly was just stratospheric and led to probably the second coolest thing in my career. The town of Florence, Oregon contacted Doncaster Council and said the interest in the story that had kind of, obviously it's done the rounds on the internet, but this kind of brought it back into the public sphere again. And they decided to mark the occasion by naming a local park the Exploding Whale Memorial Park, which my bucket list has one item on it, and it is to go to the Exploding Whale Park and just take a selfie with my phone with that thread on it. But that's just 2 examples of how you can kind of use humour. Obviously, I've made mistakes along the way, but using humour, being human, and being authentic to get your message across. And in the case of Doncaster Council, the ultimate aim is to get people to stop shouting at us for 2 minutes. So I think the key thing, if you're trying to do this yourself, which some of you guys in the room might be, you might be in charge of accounts that you're trying to get this next big thing, or you're trying to just get a bit more engagement. How can you use humour in the right way? Because I think now we've almost gone so far the other way that I see things online that all brands seem to be calling each other bestie, and it's great, we're loving it. How can you do it in a more authentic way? So what I try to do whenever I go anywhere is think about where I'm working and what would that brand be like as a person. And I feel like that's a really good starting point. So when I worked for Taylors of Harrogate, purveyors of fine coffee bags, I followed the traditional path, obviously. I left the council and I was headhunted by a zoo. That sounds like the start of a shit joke, but genuinely the zoo approached me and said, would you like to come and do our social media? They just dangled a sausage roll in front of one of the crates they use for rhinos and stuff, and I was in. And again, I try to think, actually, in some ways, that's a bigger challenge than doing the social media for a council, because when you think of a council, you have a preconception, and you have, I'm just going to skip through a couple. No, I'm not. Hang on. you have this preconception of what a council is going to be like, and if it was a person, it would probably be quite boring, quite serious, and it's in the kind of grey area playing off of that where the humour lies. Whereas when you go to a zoo, you're expecting it to be a nice, fun-filled day out. So where can you draw humour from? And I tried pretty successfully to do things like this. So every now and again, I would just post a very simple reminder that tortoises are just brilliant. I would do things like Harry Styles did a photo shoot and he'd used animals in the photo shoot. So I photoshopped our animals onto that and said, if you needed animals, Harry, you could have not flown to Milan. You could have just come to Donny and we'd have had them for you. And I ended up actually doing an Instagram-based soap opera about the lives of mongooses. It's better than it sounds. It was good. Does anyone know the Latin name for a mongoose? No, okay, I'll move on. No, it's Herpestidae. So I called this soap opera Herpestidays of Our Lives. It's like a 6-part drama. Honestly, I'm very proud of that. But I kind of tried to trade in that, well, a zoo's meant to be an expert in animals, and wouldn't it be quite funny, actually, if I just spoke about them like I haven't got a clue what's going on? So I would tweet sometimes like, what the hell's this? I no longer work there for an unrelated. So then I moved to Taylors of Harrogate, purveyors of fine coffee bags. And again, a real challenge. For the first time, I was working for a brand where really people probably have no preconception. So I tried to trade off of just passion for coffee and the product to the point of just absurdity. So that's a very good example of the kind of thing that I would try to do. But what I quickly found out actually is it's very hard to actually be yourself when you're trying to do this, when you're trying to sort of sell something you don't really believe in. So that authentic passion, if you can find a way to do that, is always going to work best. This is an example of subverting expectations, one of my favourite ones that I did at the council. Again, it's fly tipping. Whenever I get sent a photo of fly tipping, we're excited to announce we've been chosen as the location for a British remake of Friends. Again, just the gods have dropped the exact sofa from Friends in Thorn. What are you meant to do? But subverting that expectation is so much easier when people would expect, you all have an expectation of how a local authority is going to talk about someone dumping a sofa. It's actually quite annoying, and I could go on about, it costs £317 to clear that up. But by doing that, we've actually shown a much more human side. We've engaged with a much wider audience. And of course, I'm able to then follow on with some follow-up, more council-y stuff of like a web link to how to report fly tipping. And it ends up, it's very rare that a tweet about fly tipping will get 20,000 likes on Twitter. But by doing it that way, I found it much more successful. Very quickly, I don't want to run too far over, but has anyone watched Parks and Recreation before? In Parks and Rec, it's one of my favourite shows, there is this rivalry between Pawnee, Indiana, where it's set, and a town called Eagleton, where everyone who lives in Eagleton is basically like a beautiful, genius, athletic, rich person. There's sort of a similar vibe between Sheffield and Doncaster. I'm not picking sides, but Sheffield is objectively better in every way. But you wouldn't expect Doncaster Council to ever acknowledge that. So the humour comes from trying to acknowledge that. A few years ago, someone in Sheffield made the Venus de Milo out of snow, which, well done, very cool, also a little bit pretentious. It just so happened a couple of days earlier, I'd seen this bad boy from Doncaster, complete with Budweiser arms, bins in the background. It's like the perfect council tweet. So instead of shying away from Sheffield's amazing and Doncaster's a little bit shit, isn't it? I did a tweet that said, people are making the Venus de Milo out of snow in Sheffield, meanwhile in Doncaster. And it went massive. Went massive to the point where I could then follow it up with, we'll be introducing non-optional refresher courses on snowman creation for every adult in Doncaster. They're still running to this day. You get fined if you don't attend. But it just, again, you know what I'm saying. It went completely against what you're expecting a council to do, and people found the humour in that. What I would say is, when you're trying to use humour, is to choose your moments wisely. You might have seen this going around a lot on social at the moment. Anyone seen that? It's basically, on Twitter, that alt text button there. If you use a screen reader, if you're visually impaired, you can use a screen reader and it will describe what's on the image. So you're meant to use that to help blind people or visually impaired people to understand what's going on. Brands, because they're great and they call each other bestie, they have taken that feature and made a meme out of it. So basically, people just tweet this photo, and behind that, they've just put a joke, like a rubbish joke. And McDonald's Canada put behind there, they just put "Pickles are life," which is not fun. It's nothing. It's not funny. It's just like trying to grab a personality from nowhere. But actually, here's a brand that's done it brilliantly. This is what Specsavers did. So they tweeted the same image, but behind that alt text, they basically said, can everyone stop doing this really stupid thing that everyone started to do? It ties into their brand, obviously, vision, but it makes them seem so much more human and in touch with how people actually feel than like the 10 likes that doing the McDonald's way would get you. So yeah, choosing your moments wisely is really important as well. Bless you, my friend. So I just want to talk briefly to finish on, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. I did some training a few years ago for Liverpool Guild of Students, essentially like Liverpool Students' Union. And as part of the training, I asked them, have you got any ideas for your social of like funny little nuggets like the fly-tipped sofa that you could use? And someone said, well, we have got that blue plaque in the canteen about the time Ian McKellen came here and ate a jacket potato. And I thought, yes, my friends, yes. That's exactly the kind of thing that they'd got that, they'd not really done anything with it. So I said, maybe an idea might be on the 3rd of March every year, you could do an Ian McKellen Day to commemorate that momentous occasion when he ate a jacket potato. Do like an offer if you come in dressed as Gandalf, or I don't know, half price on jacket potatoes. I kept in touch with them over the next couple of years. That was back in 2019. Kept in touch with them. And recently, this March just gone, I got a message on LinkedIn from their comms manager that said not only had they run with the Ian McKellen Day idea, but this year, Ian McKellen was actually in Liverpool on the day of Ian McKellen Day. And there's the bloody man himself. So that just shows you that, like, being a bit silly and being stupid and just human and having that kind of conversation that you have with your friends and taking, I mean, that's a genius idea that someone bothered to do that, but taking that a step further with that sense of humour that you've got is such a powerful tool. I feel like I could rabbit on for a long time, but I will stop. Is there time for questions, or have I gone too long? There's time. Thank you.
So I actually do have a quick question.
Yeah.
When we caught up a couple of weeks ago, I remember one of my favourites was we were talking about the Yorkshire Tea account.
Yeah.
And Yorkshire Tea, they had an incident at one point where they tweeted about the fact that Rishi Sunak had had a photo shoot with Yorkshire Tea, and they were really angry about it because they said, well, we didn't agree to that. And somebody called Sue replied and went, oh, I didn't realise that blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, no, it's this. And she just went on a complete rant. It was like 5 or 6 tweets. And they just went, Sue, you're shouting at tea. And it's like one of the best tweets ever.
Yeah.
But the thing that really struck me is brands are able to do that because they have a brand voice. They have something which they've created, generally with an agency or an internal team, whatever. They've created a voice for themselves. And that gives them permission to do those sorts of things. How do you convince a council, of all people, that you can do this, that you're allowed to just be funny on a public Twitter account that's meant to be, for most councils, pretty serious?
With great difficulty. No, it's really is, I mean, I've summed it up in 20 minutes, but it's step by step. So, like, I didn't start with the speedboat thread, I didn't start with a gritter naming competition. I started with 100 things like the Christmas light switch on, where maybe just the language was a bit more colloquial, or I'd reply to someone in a bit of a sassy way, a bit like the Sue you're shouting at tea. Someone would moan about a pothole on Facebook, and I would reply like, give us the location, we'll be there in 2 minutes. And, you know, they weren't very happy about that one for some reason. But yeah, just doing those small things and taking a step into it. It's like a running jump, and before you know it, you're doing things that you think are impossible for a council to ever do. I was very lucky as well that the leadership of the council also had that awareness of why it worked and why it was important. So a lot of places can't really do it because they are too afraid of it. And don't get me wrong, it's happened where I've pitched 1,000 things that never went anywhere. I used to have to go and live tweet along to the council meetings, full council meetings, and I was extremely bored, and I tweeted along as if it was like the Oscars. So I was like, oh my God, Councillor Hinchcliffe's here. What are you wearing? And stuff like that. And I only did that the once because they weren't a fan of that. But sometimes it is throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks as well. So yeah, you have to just be brave and not be afraid of the rejection of it going wrong.
Nice. Okay. Who has questions for Liam? Yeah, I thought that'd be for you. Right. Okay. I'm going to throw the... Hands up. Right.
Throw the box.
Throw the ball. Right. I'm going to try and get you at the top.
Here we go. He's done it.
Hi Liam, thanks for coming.
Hello.
I'm Jack.
Side up. Mike.
Hello mate. Carrying on with your social media disputes and things like that, I've noticed that Aldi on Twitter are quite backlash to other companies. I saw that some woman posted that someone had left a Morrison's trolley in an Aldi shop, and they were like, there's like a thread of Aldi going, we want our trolley back, Morrison's. Like, they can be so backlash to customers as well. They got like a new Freddo frog thing, chocolate bar, and they're like, this woman's like, and they're just going, we don't care. They're brilliant. If you ever get time, scroll on Aldi's Twitter, because they can be harsh.
I think what they've done brilliantly is using that, subverting the expectation, because we all have this image of Aldi as a place that it's full of brands that are so close to the IP of an existing brand, and they just shamelessly rip it off. And you kind of think there's no way they'll ever acknowledge that, but they've lent into that so much with the whole Cuthbert, the Caterpillar stuff with M&S. They are really good at that. But again, it's bravery. That's what it comes down to. And like Tom just said, trying to convince, that must have taken some convincing to, the right people to let them do that. Yeah, it's interesting.
Cheers, mate. You next. Tom.
Cheers. Moving back to the bounties out of the box of celebrations, is the stance on that your own personal view or that of Doncaster City Council? I just wanted to clarify.
Listen. Such a policy. We all like chocolate. No, I don't. I like bounties, actually. I think the worst... What's in a celebration box? A Malteser still in it. I'm not a big... Yeah, eclairs.
I'll be honest, I didn't think one of the questions would be, what is your favourite chocolate?
Can any business do this, or are there people who should just stay clear?
Very good question. And the answer I found the hard way is no, not every business can do it. Because I set up my own business thinking, I can do this wherever I want to go. And I got a contract for a company that make the platforms that window cleaners use on skyscrapers. And they said, the one thing you can't mention is the height. Okay. Great. Day one, I was sat there, oh, God. So no, I don't think you can do it wherever. And I think, but that doesn't mean, I think people confuse humour with human, where everyone can be human and be more personable. And I think that comes across sometimes in a funny way. And I think most places could do that. So not using jargon, not just tweeting stuff or putting on Instagram stuff you've made on Canva or really corporate stuff all the time. But yeah, I don't think everywhere could just be really wacky. Some places are trying way too hard to do that. And I think it rings a bit false, maybe. Excuse me.
Who's next? Laura? Bye.
Oh, God.
I thought you were going to ask a question. Oh, bless you. I forgot what it is. Hang on.
Give it back.
No, so I think I don't think I'm going to form this question very well, but I guess we're trying to do this at the theatre, right? Trying to be a bit more personable. We keep slipping back into, oh, this show's on this weekend, comes like into just a sales pitch, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of hate that. But I guess there's a nervousness around, maybe is it like a generational thing about, what I don't want to do is alienate actually what have been a really loyal audience and people who might, I don't know, take offence or just think, well, you're just being silly now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what that boils down to quite often is where your audiences are. So on different platforms, be totally different. So some of the stuff I've spoken about there, we didn't go anywhere near on Facebook for the council because Facebook for a council is just a hellscape where it is potholes and dog shit. Not the tone that I wanted to end on. But yeah, I think you just have to know where your audience are, and you can take more risks on like a TikTok or an Instagram than you can on Facebook, basically.
Thanks very much for coming all the way over to see us. Liam Smith.